Hi, I'm Linda Braun, and I'm the YALSA Continuing Education Consultant. And I'm really happy to have you here for our webinar with Ryan Munez. Actually, I have never said your last name out loud.
That is
Say your
very
last
true.
name for me.
Monez.
I did it right?
You're right on the money.
Wow. All right. With Ryan, I will never say it again. With Ryan from the Markham Public Library. And
yep.
Ryan is doing really amazing things with and for teens as a community librarian. So it's a little bit of a different position, I think, than a lot of the people in this webinar may be in.
Yep.
And before I get Ryan started, I'm just going to mention a couple of things. Feel free to chat throughout the session. I have everybody muted right now just because background noise in libraries sometimes gets in the way. So I've made it that people cannot unmute themselves, but I'm happy to unmute you when we get to the question and answer period. But during the session, feel free to add to the chat. We'd be happy to have that going, and we'll be looking at questions along the way, and Ryan will be able to answer questions along the way as well as at the end. We'll go for an hour, and then when we're done, I will be sending out a recording of the session as well as the PowerPoint slides. So that's it. If you have any questions or anything happens, chat me and I will answer them. But I don't want to take any more time from Ryan, so you are on.
Alrighty, perfect. So thank you everybody for being here. So we're here to talk a little bit about breaking down those barriers between teens and library staff. I wanted to make this worth your while, so I packed in a ton of content. It's a lot for an hour, but I know we can get through, and I definitely want to make sure we leave time for the end. So hey, thanks for being here. We really appreciate it. It's pretty cool to have all sorts of different people here from across the nation be able to talk about teen services. So you're probably saying, wait, who the heck is this guy? Yes, I can see into his kitchen, but I want to know a little bit more. So I've spent the last about 15 years just working in a variety of roles, and you can see some of them there. Everything I've tried to do is just work towards one common goal, and it's serve communities and individuals who are in need. So where I live in Markham, Ontario, we have a very diverse population, and they have unique needs. And that's part of what I've been trying to do is serve those needs and do it while at the library. So we're going to talk about a few things today. How our teens are a little bit different as customers, where the library fits in and how we can support them. We're going to talk about the 4 goals of programming. This is kind of what I've modeled everything I've ever done around. A little bit of an idea springboard. So I want to share ideas with in a couple different areas, and hopefully it's something either you can adapt at your library or you say, hey, maybe we can't do that, but it gives me an idea for this, how you can take action, and then definitely an opportunity for Q&A at the end. So why are we here? Well, we're here because we want to serve our teens. The challenge is we don't know the populations that we're trying to serve. So if we don't know teens, what their needs are, what they're going through, what they're experiencing, it makes serving them a challenge. So we want to talk a little bit more about that today. So how are teens different? Just to get started off, there's no arguing with the science. Teens are different simply because their brains just haven't finished developing. And because of that, they have difficulty, they have trouble in a couple of areas, namely understanding consequences, self-control, goal setting, motivation, attention span. This just gives you a bit of an idea. Think about teens and think about teens that have difficulty in, I just realized they're cutting the grass outside. Wait, let me close that door 1 second.
It's like live TV, right? You never know what's going to happen.
You know what? They never come to cut the grass, and they do it on the day we're having a webinar. So hopefully everybody can still hear. But yeah, so we don't always think about it when we're interacting with teens, but they just have a different thought process than you or I. You know, we often think when a teen does something, we say, you know what? You should know better. You should really know better. But should they all the time? You know, we can't expect them to behave the same way you or I would. Their brains just aren't at that same level. They don't have the same capacity for saying, hey, you know what, if I do this, something bad may happen. They're not necessarily thinking about that. They're too busy, often seeking that sensation, right? They come up to a library staff member, there's a bit of an altercation, there's a bit of a conflict, and they kind of thrive off of that. Again, not everybody, but it's something that is common with a lot of teens, and it's common with teens we've seen at the library. And we all know that they have a desire for peer acceptance, right? Taking risk-taking behavior. And a lot of this goes back to, not to get too sciencey, but their dopamine receptors. teens are much more sensitive to it. So when they have that conflict, when they have that confrontation, they're almost getting a little bit of a high off the dopamine, and it's something that they work towards. It's something that they look forward to, right? It makes them feel a little bit better. Think about people who go for a run and you hear the expression of like a runner's high. You go for that run, you get that shot of dopamine and you feel good, you feel better. Teens are just like a lot more sensitive to it, and that plays a big role in their type of behavior. Now, think about what teens want from the library. Well, it could be a variety of different things. You know, for us in our library system, we know that they want just a safe place to hang out or to do schoolwork. You know, there's not a lot of places in the community a teen can go and just feel comfortable, feel safe. If you go to a mall and you're walking around in a store, what ends up happening, you know, again, not to generalize, but we all remember what it was being a teen. You know, people just kind of look at you a little different. They treat you a little different. Well, libraries are supposed to be just a safe place where everyone can come, everybody is welcome. So whether they want to come in and watch Netflix together or do some schoolwork, that's what the library is for. And then of course, entertainment, video games, programs, whatever it might be. Of course, the resources we have. So definitely books, but a lot of people think, you know, the internet is something that everybody has at home. That's not necessarily true. We know that a lot of teens who come into the library, you know, maybe they're preparing a resume to apply for a job. They don't have internet at home. They don't have a laptop. So they're coming in to use those services. We have a lot of teens use our library as a place to get volunteer opportunities. They're trying to gain some skills. They want to learn a little bit. And as a result, they come to the library for that opportunity. And of course, personal assistance. So they come in because they have an assignment and they're having a hard time doing research. So they say, hey, I think the librarian will know what to do, or the librarian will know how to help me. So there's a lot of different reasons that teens come to the library. Think about how they use your space and keep that in mind as we go through. Now, are teens stressed? I think the resounding answer would be yes. Think about when you were a teen, you were probably stressed out. Lord knows I was. And it's unfortunate because we don't often think about the impact some of their stressors can have on their lives. Well, you're juggling the academic pressure of being a teen. So in Markham, we have one of the highest percentages of parents with undergraduate degrees or college degrees. That puts a lot of pressure on the kids because you have these parents who are growing up saying, as the child grows up saying, listen, we know the value of education. So whether or not you do, we're going to put this pressure on you and say, you need to do this in school. You need to go and become an engineer. I know it sounds cliche, but I've lived in this community for long enough to know that it's true. It's a lot of parents saying, hey, we know what's best for you. Follow what we're saying. And as a child, as a teen, you're saying, man, I want to explore what I want to do. You don't really get that opportunity. And then you're talking again, yeah, family expectations, right? Maybe you feel like you want to do something different, but you're always dealing with the pressure of living up to an expectation that your family has. The social influence, when you think about social media, it's kind of a crappy time to grow up. Yeah, there's tons of great uses for social media, but then think about how connected they always are. They're never not connected. And that's tricky, that's difficult. You are sitting in class about to do an exam, you go on your phone and you're looking at people who are on a beach in Mexico or who are hanging out doing something else, and you're internalizing that. You're saying, man, like this sucks, I don't want to be here, I don't want to do this. And then of course, money. I know for a lot of the teens in our area, they're always thinking about how am I going to pay for school? You know, how am I going to pay for a house? Am I ever going to be able to move out? Toronto has ridiculously high prices for real estate. And it's a challenge that they know is coming up for them. Once they're out of high school, once they've done their degree, they're always saying, what am I going to do? And I'm sure you can think of other areas where teens are experiencing some of those stressors. And yeah, I know we're talking a little bit in the chat. And absolutely, I talk usually a little bit about LGBTQ when I do training with staff in Canada, in Ontario specifically. LGBTQ teens have a 14 times greater risk of committing suicide than their heterosexual peers. We can't argue with the stats. Like it's just the truth, and it's unfortunate. So it goes back, you know, what can the library be doing? How can we play a role in supporting absolutely everybody? So these are just some of the stats that I put together. This is all relative to the States. So I do live in Canada. Our stats are a little bit different, but you can just see that it's an issue, right? 1 in 4 youth meet criteria for a lifetime mental disorder associated with severe role impairment. When we're talking 1 in 4, that's a pretty high ratio. We're talking 21% low-income children, between 6 to 17 having a mental health disorder. Again, the stats are out there. We tend to ignore it. Maybe it's not in front of us all the time, so we just look past it. But it's more and more of a reason for libraries to be involved and take an active role in supporting these individuals. So like I said, is there a need? There is absolutely a need. And I think there's probably a unique need in each of our communities. And I'm sure you'll have a better understanding of that. From the time that I've spent in this community, I've learned what exactly it is that the teens need here. And from the time that you're spending in your communities, I'm sure you have an understanding. And so hopefully the information we talk about today will help you support them even better than you're absolutely already doing. So who are we going to talk about today? I want to focus on 3 groups in particular. Keep in mind what we talk about can really be applied to teens in general, to absolutely everyone. But I consistently find that these are the 3 groups that are left behind when we're talking about at-risk youth, and this could include LGBTQ. We're talking about individuals with special needs, and absolutely those living with mental health issues. There are 3 segments of the population here in Markham that are consistently overlooked. They don't have programs. There's a lack of education even for community support workers on how to intervene. So if we see a homeless individual come into the library, staff don't really feel comfortable going up and saying, hey, do you need some support? Is there anything we can do? Because they don't even know the services that are out there. So it's definitely a challenge, and we want to focus on these 3 groups today. Something to keep in mind though, you're never really working with one group in isolation, right? So these 3 groups can make up any group of teens that come into your library. Maybe they're a part of just, one of the little circles you see, or they could be part of all of it. Having worked with special needs individuals, that's kind of how I got my start. I know they definitely fall into that at-risk category. You're talking about young adults or teens who, once they graduate high school, that's it. There's no extra support. The school board's not there to help them. The parents have to go to work. What happens to these kids? I always like to include this quote. I know sometimes it doesn't go over too well, but I truly believe in it. I think bad libraries only build collections and good libraries build services. But if you really want to be a great library, you're building that sense of community. You are creating a place where people will look towards and say, hey, I need help. I need support. I want to go to the library. I want that to be one of the first stops I make. They'll know where I should go. They'll be able to tell me who I should speak to. And we're trying to do that with our library. And I hope that you guys are doing the same thing. And I'm sure you are. I'm sure people in your community look at your library as a place that they feel welcomed at. They feel like they can go in, not be judged, and just be comfortable and feel safe. And that's hard to find in this world. When you think about how lucky we are to have spaces like libraries, it's definitely not something that we should overlook. So I'd like to talk about the 4 goals of programming. So this has been what I've used to guide all the programs that I've done, whether it's been for kids, teens, young adults, people with intellectual disabilities, whatever it may be. I've always tried to use these 4 goals to guide me along the way. What I will say is don't get hung up on if you want to take notes or anything like that. Kind of just listen in. We're definitely going to make, obviously, this whole thing available afterwards. So I don't want you to miss out on kind of just what we're going to be talking about. So you can see the 4 goals on the screen. Number 1 is socialize. Number 2, teach new skills. Challenge zone, maybe it's something you guys haven't heard of, we're going to talk about. And then fun. I know it's cheesy, but it's true. Who wants a program that isn't fun? So number 1, socialize. When we think about working with teens or trying to support teens, specifically ones that are at risk, you're talking about people who are already socially isolated. They maybe don't have access to different services. Their parents aren't there to be able to put them in different programs. They're kind of saying to themselves, I'm by myself. What do I do? Where do I go? I go hang out at the mall. I go hang out at the movie theater. And they're not necessarily able to make those connections. And then when we think about how connected teens are now online, it's a challenge to have those real friendships, those real meaningful friendships. Not to say you can't have a meaningful friendship online. I know all my buddies who game online would disagree. It's not that, but sometimes it is important to have a person there in front of you that you can vent to, that you can talk to and lean on for support. So whenever you have a program, you want it to have that aspect of socialize, like just being able to socialize, having people come out. So this isn't just a picture from some of the special needs programs that we've been doing. And what's so cool is we'll have participants from all across the area. So yes, the program is in Markham, but we have people coming from Richmond Hill and all over because they see value in it. And they say, hey, there's other people like me. I want to go out there and I want to meet them. I want to make new friends. And then of course it's teaching new skills. You want to give them an opportunity to learn. So if it's a program about computer skills? Are they learning coding? Are they learning how to keyboard? You always want there to be something that they can come away with. Now, it doesn't always happen that you're going to see what the skill is. It won't always be observable. It could be, like I say there, an increase in self-esteem. You know, you have someone that comes out. There's a program I'm going to talk about a little later on, but we had these teens that came out that were clinically depressed, and they would sit there and they would be quiet. And maybe they wouldn't say anything the whole way through. So you're like, oh man, am I connecting with these kids, or are they appreciating what I'm saying? You know, is it meaningful to them? You won't always know in the moment, but that's what you should strive for, is to at least provide that information. So if you are talking about trying to build self-esteem, you know, having activities, talking about self-worth, at least if you can do that, you're getting into their heads, and it's going to sit there and it's going to ruminate. And I can say from experience, they like it, and they want to hear that, you know, that constant positive encouragement from someone that they are taking a program with. So this is a little trickier to describe. Hopefully the graph helps, but so the challenge zone is kind of where you want to have any program. The best way to think about it is soccer, for example, right? So as a person who plays soccer, let's say you go to soccer camp, and the first thing you're doing is just learning how to pass the ball. So if I'm someone who's amazing at soccer, I'm going to be bored because it's way below my skill level. So you can see on the left-hand side where it says task difficulty, and on the bottom where it says participant skill level. You don't want this task difficulty to be low and participant skill level to be high, because that's when you're going to fall into that boredom piece. But you also don't want it to be extremely challenging, because then the individual is going to say, man, like, I can't do this. You know, this is way above the skill that I have. That carries over into a program. So if you're doing something and it is for teens, and it is, let's say, a computer program, you're talking about developing a resume. We can't just assume that the people coming in are already going to have an understanding of, you know, what it means, what you need to have to be able to build a resume. So you want to kind of cater it and say, okay, we want to fall in the middle. It may not be the same for everyone. That's kind of the challenge with the challenge zone, no pun intended, but part of having a good program is adapting. So if you have participants that come to your program, whether it's a book club, whether it's a computer program, if you see people are moving ahead and they're kind of losing interest, you get to challenge them a little bit and say, hey, well, you know what? So-and-so is having a more difficult time. Do you think you'd be able to support them, to provide a little extra help? Now you're bringing in that peer mentoring, which I've always believed in. I think peer mentoring is something that's great. So I know challenge zone can be a little tricky. Hopefully that makes sense. But like I said, if you have questions, please feel free to let us know. And the goal 4 is have fun. So this was us just playing Wii U, Super Mario Tennis. It was a blast. It was just something fun to do. The cool thing about this is with a computer program with young adults that have special needs. So fine motor skills are something that they have a challenge with. But I gave them a Wii controller. I just kind of showed them how to use it, and they were able to do it, and they had so much fun. It was an absolute blast. So never forget that you want to incorporate fun in some way with any program that you do. So what we're going to do now is just jump into a few programming ideas. I don't know if you can tell, I love The Simpsons, so I always find a way to incorporate it as much as I can. So I want to share a couple ideas, a couple programs that we've done, and hopefully it's something that you can either adapt at your library, or you say, hey, you know what, that's a good idea. I think maybe we can do something with this. You know, let's adapt it, let's change. I want to start off by saying I'm happy to share any of the information I have about these programs. So whether it's the content we've developed, what kind of the steps we took to get their programs up and running. Part of working, you know, in an amazing library system and with amazing people like everyone here is we want to be able to share. We don't want to work in isolation. So if you're interested in anything, by all means, my contact info will be up on the screen at the end. Just email me and say, hey, you know, we want to know more about a program. I'm always happy to share. Before you start doing any program, you should ask yourself a couple of questions. First and foremost, who is your target population? You know, people will say, I want to do a mental health program for teens. Okay, well, are you talking about teens in general? Are you talking about teens that have an actual clinical diagnosis? Once you have an understanding of who that population is, then you're able to say, okay, well, I know who my target audience is. Now I want to start developing the goals. Well, are the goals having these teens feel more engaged in the community, learn coping skills, learn about what the library can do? Do you want them to come out of the program and have an increased feeling of self-worth, of self-esteem? Once you get to that, you're able to say, okay, well, wait, are we the experts in putting this material together? You know, when it comes to self-esteem and mental health, chances are maybe your library is not the expert, the content subject matter experts. I know we weren't. So what did we do? We said, all right, who is the subject matter expert? And we went out and we found people that worked at different hospitals, child and youth workers who were interested in coming in and supporting us. So here's the first kind of programming idea for at-risk youth in libraries. So it's something we did called job skills training. I'm sure a lot of people have done this, but it's something that's been very successful for us. And we always like to share it just because, you know, other times people think, hey, this would be cool. I don't really know how to get started. We have right beside one of our library branches, a high school. And the high school is kind of more of a higher needs high school. We have a lot of students who don't necessarily graduate, who don't go on to any form of post-secondary education. So what we did is we went over to the school and we said, hey, you know, we know that you have students that decide that they just want to skip school, come over and hang out at the library because they don't feel like school is for them. How can we work together to support each other? You know, encourage those students not only to stay in school, but help prepare them for life after high school. So they said, yeah, well, I think it would be really cool if we can have something around job skills training. So for those students who aren't going to go on and stay in school, you know, maybe we can do something for them so they can learn basic skills, how to market themselves, how to put together a resume. So we knew we weren't the experts, but we knew we had the audience. We had the teens already in the library. So we put a call out and we looked in the community, hey, who is out there that's already trying to do this? And that's when we came across JVS Toronto. They're an amazing organization to work with. We simply just made a phone call and said, hey, you know, this is what we're thinking of doing. What services do you have? And they were amazed that we were hoping to offer it because they had a program that kind of fit perfectly with it. It was this program that provided teens and people who had never had a job incentives to actually go out and get that first job. So as a teen, if you were under the age of 25, so not just teens, but young adults, but if you had never had a job, they would provide you with a $300 stipend to get started. So if you got that first job at Dairy Queen, they would help you get set up with your shoes, right? Your non-slip shoes, your uniform, all those things are associated costs that we don't normally think of, but they can hold back a lot of teens who say, you know what, I don't have $100 for a uniform right now. I can't take that job. So they helped to remove some of those barriers. And what we did is we brought them out to the library. They facilitated a number of different workshops. They focused on resume building, visual cover letters. I was there as a library staff member to kind of tie in what services the library had to support these students. And it was a great program. We had a number of them go on to find jobs, and you're taking them out of that pool of young adults who are at risk in terms of not being able to find a job and dropping out of school and whatnot. So that's just an example of something we tried to do for at-risk. Hopefully that's something you think, hey, you know what, we can make this work at our library. Like I said, if you have questions about it, let me know at any time. So now for a special needs program example, this is something we've been doing now for about 3 years, and it's our essential skills computer class. So we've partnered with a local organization, Community Living York South. Their mission is to serve individuals who have a special need across the city of Markham. They've been amazing partners to work with. I was just at their conference last week speaking about how organizations can work better with municipalities to accomplish their mandates. For this program, we figured, hey, we teach computer classes already. We do one-on-one tutorials on how to use an iPad, on keyboarding and all sorts of stuff with the public. Why don't we just adapt it? Why don't we find a way to make it work for people who are going to have a whole different skill set as it relates to using a computer? Now, I always like to tell a story about this program because it kind of shows that it is valuable to do. So there's a young man down here in the plaid shirt. You can't see his face, but he was like the resident musician. He could sing. He sounded like Frank Sinatra. It was absolutely amazing. But you could see that part of that humor that he would use came from not knowing computers. And he was worried. He didn't want people to make fun of him. But we adapted the program as best as we could. Everyone you see in this picture had a different skill level. So we developed content that we said, hey, you know, we want to make this manageable. We want to make sure that we can incorporate everybody into the program. You know, that whole challenge zone where we don't want people feeling left out because they can't keep up with their peers. So anyways, he came to the program for about 2-3 weeks in a row. And I was doing rounds, just kind of going around, making sure everyone was okay with their activity, with the task they were working on. And I heard him say to the young lady beside him, you know, I can't believe it. I can't believe I'm doing it. I'm using a computer. I'm using a mouse. I mean, to us, it's just a skill where you say, that's something I do every day. But to him, it meant a lot. You know, it's a new sense of freedom, something that he can do on his own. And that's what the library can do. Not just our library, but I think any library can do that. In terms of content, like I said, I'm happy to share some of the content we've put together. We're actually expanding this program now. It's a free program we've been running at one branch. We're now looking at running it at about 3 or 4 branches across the city. And we're going to expand it to focusing on keyboarding and actually introducing coding. So again, it won't be advanced coding, but we want to get the participants started off. And again, it's a skill. It's an opportunity to have fun, to socialize, and to learn something new, because you never know where that skill can take them. Last, we're going to talk about an example of a mental health program. And this is something that I've always held kind of dear to my heart. It was one of the first programs I put together when I started working at the library, and I've loved it. And it's something I absolutely love doing. It's like the highlight of the time I spend there. It's something called the Get With It program. So we partnered with a local hospital, Markham Stouffville Hospital, and they have something called an Atlas Day program. So they have students that the school board actually says, you know what, this young person is not doing well in high school. We want to take them out of that environment. We still want them to get credits, but we don't think them being at a high school is conducive to, positive mental health. So they put them in this program at the hospital. And I remember approaching them and saying, hey, listen, why don't we do something together? Why don't we collaborate on it? So what we do is biweekly workshops where the teens, the young adults, they'll come out to the library and we talk about a variety of programs, a variety of topics. We talk about library resources. So just, the advantage of having a library card. That's usually the first one we do. But what's really cool is because we're able to work with the social workers and child and youth workers that come over with the group, we started to be able to get into some pretty cool topics. We started talking about teen sexual health, which was by far the most popular for the group. We would bring in local sexual health professionals to answer some of the questions. Like teens are talking about, if I use a condom, is it 100% safe all the time? These are the questions that they have and they don't know who to talk to. So giving these teens an avenue and having a local professional there to help guide them and give them actual accurate information. I mean, it was huge. It was a huge thing for them. So that's one example. We would talk about, life after high school, how to figure out what it is that you want to do. And it was such a meaningful opportunity, not just to learn in the program, but there's a little letter up on the screen. You don't really have to read the whole thing, but what it talks about is as a young lady who came to the program, she was severely depressed, social anxiety disorder. She just wasn't a person who enjoyed being in public. She couldn't handle it. It was way too overwhelming. So through the hospital program, then what we were doing, kind of focusing on building that self-esteem, stress management, she blossomed and she really did improve. So much to the point where we were able to get her to volunteer at the library with some of our summer camps. At first, she didn't think she would enjoy it. By the end of the second week of volunteering with the little kids, not only did they look up to her, but she realized how empowered she felt. She was someone who could accomplish things. She was someone who people would look up to. So you're talking about now, a person who was depressed, who felt such lows that we can't necessarily understand. And now she's able to see the impact she can make in her community, in the lives of children. It was amazing to see. And I can tell you on the last day of the camp, she cried because she was sad she wasn't going to see the kids. This was already a couple of years ago. We know now that she went to university. She's doing a business program and she's doing well. Whether or not the library takes credit for it, that's not the point. It's just we gave her the opportunity to learn, to talk, to meet people and learn new things. And I think that's something any library system could do. So now we're going to move into really taking action in 6 simple steps. And we're making good time, so we'll definitely have an opportunity to answer some of those questions. So before you develop a program, before you create a new initiative, a new direction for your library, the first thing you need to do is understand what are the gaps that exist in your community. So if we're talking about serving groups of teens that have special needs, have intellectual disability, learning disability, whatever it may be, what isn't out there already? And I think this is the challenge for a lot of library systems. We will work in a bubble just at, in Markham. We'll say, okay, well, what is out there? What do people need? I think we know what people need. Let's go do it. What we don't realize is, the library down the street in Richmond Hill, they're already offering something similar. We end up feeling like we have to recreate the wheel every single time we want to do a program. That's not necessarily the case. We are all peers. So whether or not, you're in this webinar with someone today that is down the street from you, it doesn't matter. The ideas are there, the opportunity to share. So whether it's through emails, phone calls, but get out in the community if you can and talk to people, or get on the phone and talk to people and find out what it is that isn't out there already. We do a lot of it through attending support groups. So support groups that are already out in the community, parental support groups for children with, or parents of children with autism. We'll go to those support groups and say, hey, what do you feel like you're lacking in the community? And parents will say, meaningful opportunities. Our teens, our kids are just sitting at home all day when they're out of high school. They have nothing to do. And that led us to creating an actual special needs volunteer program at the library, where now we're able to take in volunteers who have special needs and be able to support them better, give them meaningful experience, get them out of the house, out in front of the TV. And that came from just suggestions we got from parents by doing that outreach, by getting out there in the community, which I think is so important. I know the challenge here is not all library systems have the capacity to send people out and do outreach. And I get it. If possible, though, try your best, because that's the best way you'll learn about your communities, by just being out there. It's where some of the best ideas have come from for us, just going out, talking to people and saying, oh man, that's an amazing idea. Why haven't we done that? If that's not possible, though, getting online, joining community forums. So whether it's message boards for, local moms in a new suburb, it'll give you a better understanding again of just what the gaps are that are existing in your community. And then next, once you know what the gap is, so meaningful opportunities for young adults with autism, they're sitting at home, they're watching TV all day. We don't want that to happen. Now, what do? That's when you start creating your program plan. You said, okay, we know we want to have a program for young adults 18 to 25. What do we want the program to look like? Well, we want to give them an opportunity to socialize. Maybe we want them to play video games. Whatever it is, start off though with an understanding of what you want it to actually look like, and then start developing what your learning objectives are. So are the learning objectives, if it's a computer-based program, we want them to know how to type their name. We want them to be able to send an email to a family member. These are a lot of the objectives that we've used in our computer programs for teens who don't have computer skills. Not even just necessarily teens who have special needs, but we have a lot of teens that come into the library, like I said, that don't have access to a computer at home, very limited keyboarding skills. So these types of learning objectives, they can be applied across your system. It doesn't necessarily have to just be for one particular segment of your population. Keyboarding skills is something that a lot of people can work on. So again, just having a couple learning objectives will help direct your program. It'll help you figure out exactly what your program is going to look like. If you just say you want teens to come out and play video games, that's great. I'm sure it'll be a fun time. But you want to try and have them do something while they're there. Is it just interacting with one another? Is it some opportunity for socializing? Is it increase of self-esteem? Whatever it is, at least having some learning objectives, that's going to help you develop your program down the road. And then again, how are you going to accomplish those objectives? So are you going to do it through an interactive lesson? Is a library staff member going to be standing at the front of the room and facilitating a lesson on, how to type out your name, how to use a mouse? Or is it something that's going to be volunteer-led? Or is it just going to be participant-led? Again, you have to ask yourself these questions and you have to have concrete answers. I've seen it too often where people have an idea, they think it's something they want to do. What ends up happening is they put all this work into developing it. They never ask themselves any of these questions. And then when it comes time to delivering it, it's kind of like, oh, wait, I didn't think about that. Do we have library staff that are available? Can we work someone into the schedule? So I'm sure a lot of you do this already, but just having a better idea, knowing what you want it to look like, how you're going to accomplish the different goals, it's going to save a lot of headaches down the road. And I think this one is most important. Again, I know my community, I don't know all of yours, but I imagine that there are subject matter experts who are out there. And what we don't realize, a lot of these groups, so the three groups you see on the screen, Community Living New York South, Curious Place Autism Services, and Autism Ontario, they're three groups that I've worked with extensively for all of our special needs programming. And at first when I approached them, I was hesitant because I'm thinking, oh man, maybe they don't want to collaborate with us. But I got there and I started talking to them, and they're saying, no, this is our mandate. Our mandate is to help educate the community, to connect with organizations like the library. And it's led to great partnerships. So think about what exists in your community, who is already serving your target audience in your community. And do you think it'd be possible to participate with them, right? I mean, to collaborate with them? Maybe they'll say no. I found more often than not, they say yes, because again, it just kind of helps them further their mandate. You know, for an organization like Autism Ontario, a lot of the parents in Markham, they have a hard time accessing the resources and the services that are available. They don't necessarily know what Autism Ontario is doing for people in their situation. By having it at the library, you know, you're walking into the library now and you're seeing a poster, you're seeing a flyer, or you're attending a library program that's able to say, hey, you know, don't forget, these are some of the resources that are out there that are available to you. And it's not just like I said, it's not unique to special needs programming. It applies to pretty much any programming you want to do. If you feel like there are experts that are out there, rather than you trying to just create something on your own, see what they have available, see what they're willing to contribute. We're doing special needs training for all of our branch staff. You know, we want to have more programming for individuals with special needs. We understand that no one on staff has the level of expertise that someone would from any of these organizations. So we've been able to work with them collaboratively, and it's led to great success in the past, and we know it will in the future. So I highly encourage you to just start off with even a Google search and see who's in your area. You know, maybe it's not down your street, but I can guarantee that there are services that are set up. More often than not, we just don't know about them. And like I was saying about training staff, this is super important. You know, how are you going to deliver that program? Is it going to be staff led? Well, then does that staff member need additional training? And this is when you can collaborate with those experts to develop materials you can provide to staff, whether it's how to handle difficult situations, how to de-escalate situations with teens that come into the library, whatever the training might be. Again, if you feel like you're not the subject matter expert, consult with people who you feel are. And again, I think more often than not, you'll see organizations that are there and are willing to help you. And then of course, no program would be successful if you weren't promoting. Again, the advantage with working alongside a lot of community organizations is they have their network, you have yours. So the challenge for us when we first started doing a lot of programming, even for teens, for at-risk teens, whatever it might be, students specifically, I'll talk about students, we were doing programming for high school students, you know, how to figure out what you want to do after you graduate high school, how to write a scholarship proposal for a university, whatever it was. And we're trying to promote, we're promoting in the library, we're promoting online. It wasn't really getting anywhere. It wasn't until we approached the school board and said, hey, you know, these are all the programs that we want to offer to teens, and we think that there's students who could benefit from it. They're able to see, hey, okay, well, now we're trying to serve the same population. We both are here to support teens. Let's work together to do it. And then we were able to get posters into the schools. Guidance counselors started getting emails saying, hey, you know, this is what the library is offering. They're able to share that information with the students who are coming in. So now if a student's coming to them and saying, hey, I don't know what I want to do with my life after high school, they can say, well, you know what, I can give you some support. I can give you some resources. But did you know that the library is having a free program, you know, in 2 weeks? Maybe it's something that you want to check out. We had huge success. About 4 years ago, I got the idea. I said, I want to do a university and college fair at the library. You know, we have a huge one downtown Toronto. A lot of kids go to it, but the challenge is parents don't really get that opportunity to go. And the questions that teens have and the questions that parents have are completely different. You know, if there's any parents in the audience, you know that, you know, you want to know a little bit more about how much it's going to cost, what the opportunities are after they graduate. Sometimes the kids will get there and they'll say, you know, what's the social life like? What's the menu like in the different cafeterias? So we decided to put this university fair on, and we got 22 schools from across Ontario to come out, colleges and universities. But much of the success came from the buy-in that the school board had. They saw the value in it. They understood what we were trying to do, and they helped us promote. So again, find those organizations that you can collaborate with, even if it's not collaborating in terms of the design of the program, of the training. If you can go to them and say, hey, we know that you're trying to serve this population. We think this program would be great. It'd be a great resource. More often than not, they'll say, hey, you know what? I think it is too. Let's get this out to our parents. Let's get this out to our social networks, and a lot more people will be able to find out what it is that the library is trying to offer. And then of course it's evaluate and improve. I think a lot of the times we will do a program and we get great feedback, right at the start. I mean, right at the end of the program, people will say, you know what, this program's great. You don't need to change a thing. And we can easily fall into that trap of like, yeah, we can kind of just keep cranking out. Let's do it year after year after year. It doesn't matter if you're getting 5 stars all the way across. I think there's always something you can improve on. So this is a little marketplace feedback form from the computer training I was talking about with the special needs young adults. You know, we gave them the form, and a lot of the times they did say, yeah, there's nothing we want to change. We really like it. But then sometimes just during conversation with their support workers, we would actually get a better understanding of what the support workers thought we could include. What ended up happening with our computer program is every week we were doing something computer related. And then out of nowhere, one of the support workers was like, well, it would be really helpful if we could talk about internet safety. That's something we haven't done. And we're like, wait a minute. That's so true. Internet safety, that's huge, right? Going online, sharing personal information, sending pictures. Again, things that we may think we know you shouldn't be doing, you know, teens shouldn't be doing. But now you're talking about someone who may have an intellectual disability. They're not necessarily able to understand, you know, hey, this person is being really nice to me online and now they're asking me for a picture. Sure, there's nothing wrong. I can send them a picture. You know, again, they're not always able to understand the consequences, what may happen if they do. And that led us to doing a completely different program. Now we have a program that's more tailored for people with intellectual disabilities, people with special needs. And we talk about mental health. We talk about cyberbullying, peer pressure, how to find fun social activities, how to stay safe online. So this whole other program kind of splintered from a computer program that we were doing. And it was simply by just getting that feedback from the participants. Now, this is really what I wanted to end on. Hopefully, so far you felt the content has been meaningful. Like I said, I'm always here for questions, whether it's email or at the end of the session today. But I really want to talk about the value of empathy. So last week, I did a teen services training for almost all of our branch staff. We had 4 days of training in a row. And this is what we wanted to hit home. Remember what it was like to be a teen? You know, close your eyes and visualize if you need to, but maybe you had a great teen experience. Maybe your teenage years were the best of your life. I think for a lot of people that wasn't the case. I know for myself, it absolutely wasn't. I was never into drugs or alcohol or anything like that, but I was always acting out. My parents, man, I'm sure they lost a lot of hair because of me. And when I think about the struggles that I had, I think how they can relate to the struggles that teens are experiencing now. We talked about all the different stressors that they face every single day. We know it's not easy. You know, okay, think about it. We have the brain development aspect. We know their brain just hasn't fully developed. They don't have the skills to be able to manage and cope with a lot of what they're trying to deal with. So on top of that, you know, lack of brain development, now you're talking about all the different stressors. So your parental pressures, the peer pressure, social media. There's always something to kind of be worried about. It's not easy being a teen. I know it sounds cheesy, but it's true. It really isn't easy to be a teen. So when they come into the library, we never know how they're feeling. We never know where they're coming from, where their head is at. And it's a challenge for us because it makes providing service to them tricky for a lot of people. We asked a lot of our staff members in kind of this anonymous survey. There's a tool out there. It's called Mentimeter. Just give it a Google if you can. And if it's a service you can get for training, it's very useful. It's called Mentimeter. And we did an online anonymous tool, a measurement with them. We asked staff, you know, are working with teens, is it outside of your comfort zone? A lot of our staff said yes. And I think it just comes from, you know, a lack of knowledge, a fear of maybe saying something wrong. You're not sure how to interact with them. I have a couple of just things on the screen, and what I want to encourage everyone here to do, and maybe go back and encourage your staff to do, is find a way to work within your skill set to support teens that come to your library. For me, it's always been humor. I've just used humor as a way to connect with teens when they've come in. And it's worked with a lot of the teens that I've encountered, that I've developed these relationships with. I always like to give just an example of, you know, people are always hung up when it comes to like food inside the library, especially in our library system. I remember being at one of the branches one day, and I popped up to the front desk, and these 4 teenage girls were walking in, and they had like an iced coffee with them. And I remember they came in and like a super stern voice, I looked at them and I said, can you come over here for a second? And you could tell on their face, they were like, wait, what's going on? Are we in trouble? Are we not supposed to be doing something? And I remember being like, hey, what do you have there? So of course they're like, oh, we have iced coffee. I'm like, okay, well, how many do you have? And they're like, 4. I'm like, okay, so there's 4 iced coffees. There's 5 of us. Like, did anybody not think to bring me a coffee? Sounds super cheesy, but it made them smile and they laughed, and it kind of started their library experience off on a right note, and then I remember just saying, okay, well, don't forget, we're here. If you need anything, let us know. And they went off, kind of just laughing, probably thinking that weird librarian guy. But for me, that works. That's my skill set. But then maybe you can take more of a compassionate approach. Maybe when teens come into the library and you know that they're studying, you know that they're stressed out, it's just giving them that positive encouragement. Maybe just as they walk in, or maybe as you're roving and going around, just saying, hey, how's the studying going? Don't forget, we're here. One great tip, it's something that we started doing, if possible, library announcements. So during exam times, during those periods of time when people are just stressed out, you can feel the tension in the library. If you can, just get on the phone, get on the horn and say, hey, we know a lot of people are here studying. Good luck to everybody. Don't forget the library is here to support you. If you need help with resources studying, just come see any library staff. It was something we started to do, and we noticed that a lot more of the people studying would come over and ask us questions. They would say, hey, I'm writing a paper. Can you help me find a resource on this? Whether or not they're doing it simply because of the announcement, we don't know. But again, it's just another way to be compassionate, to understand what they're going through, and offer your support. And maybe it's being judgment-free, right? They're coming in and you're just giving them the cold hard facts. And we have a lot of library staff that are like that. They're not there to judge what you're doing here. You want to come to the library and watch Netflix, by all means. We don't see anything wrong with that. Just be mindful about noise. Biggest one, I don't know if people here have problems with it, but it's about our essentially noise policies and all that. So we'll have a lot of adults sitting in teen areas, or where there's maybe a group of teens and those teens are having a conversation. You may not think it's loud, but then you get that complaint from a customer who says, you know what, those good for nothing teens, they're way too loud, get them out of here. Instead of walking over to them, and they're already going to see you coming over, they're probably thinking, oh boy, here we go. Now we're in trouble. We're going to be asked to leave, whatever it is. Going over to them and saying, hey, listen, you know what, to be honest, I don't really think you guys are too loud, but we have had a couple of customers that have been saying, it's a little loud in here, so can you just be mindful? Now already you're not going to them with, not to say a condescending manner, but you're going to them and you're saying already, look, yeah, I'm not putting the blame on you. I don't think it's that loud, but we have to remember we're in an open space. That's just an example of something that a lot of our library staff do. Again, I don't know if it's a situation you encounter, but know that more often than not, teens are expecting that conflict. They're so used to it, right? They think that anytime an adult's coming up to them, whether it's a teacher, someone at the grocery store, someone at the mall, they're coming up to them already with their backs up, looking for that conflict. If you can come with an approach that is a lot more compassionate and just direct and not looking for that confrontation, when they realize that, they're going to kind of let their guard down a little more too. They're not going to feel like they have to defend themselves, that they have to snap back. We've had a lot of situations where that hasn't gone well at the library. Not too long ago, we had a young man who was standing inside the library waiting for his bus. But it was cold out. He didn't want to wait outside, so he was inside listening to music, kind of walking back and forth. I ended up getting approached by one of our staff members who said, you got to deal with this guy. He's making people uncomfortable. It was like 8:45 at night. The library was closing at 9. There was no customers around. It wasn't that, people were uncomfortable. She was uncomfortable. Long story short, it escalated to the point where, she kept kind of attacking him. He noticed that he was kind of feeding off of that conflict. They started going back and forth. And like the worst thing you can possibly say was said by our library staff member, if you don't get out of here, I'm calling the cops. You never really want it to get to that point. I understand that sometimes it will. She just kind of let her emotions come through, her preconceived notions about who she thinks teens are, what he was going to do, what he was up to. And if it makes it, and kind of puts it in perspective, what was crappier too is he was a young black male. So now you're talking about already a young black male who feels like he's being judged even more by a lot of people as he's just going through his day. And now you have a library staff member coming up and saying, you know what, you're making me uncomfortable. If you don't leave, I'm going to call the cops. It was a crappy situation. We don't want that to happen at our libraries, and I know you don't want that to happen there. So again, just finding a way to encourage staff to just work within their skill set, understand, be more empathetic of what it is that teens are experiencing, what they're going through day to day, all those stressors, the brain development, everything, puberty, all the stuff that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, things that we struggle with. We have a hard time thinking about money, how we're going to pay our bills, our education, whatever it is. Be more empathetic, taking a moment to say, hey, I don't know what this teen is going through, but how can I use my skills to support them? Maybe it, like I said, it's compassion, humor, whatever it is, but hopefully just that value of empathy is what sticks out from this part of the workshop. Now, I know it's not always easy to support teens. It's not always easy to support underserved populations in your community, but you're never going to find anything more rewarding and beneficial, not just for your library system, not just for you, but for the people in your community. I think too often we get hung up thinking about doing what's easy. You know, STEM is really popular. Let's do a coding program for kids. 50 people will show up. It'll look good on my stats. Okay, we can't argue with that. But it's more important to do something for the people who don't have those opportunities, who aren't already being served. In Markham, we have 100 STEM programs all across the city. Us doing one more, that doesn't change anything. But us doing a program focusing on stress management for teens with depression, that carries a lot more weight. It's going to be a lot more rewarding and a lot more beneficial for those participants in the community as a whole, because it shows that you, your library, want to make a difference and you want to do more to support others. Now, I always like to end off with this quote: treating everyone equally doesn't always mean treating people the same. No two teens are alike. When they come into the library, whether you encounter them out in the street, it doesn't matter, but no two teens, no two individuals are ever really going to be alike. We want to treat people equally, but you always have to stop and say, you know what? We can't treat people the same. I can't go up to this teen and talk to them the same way as I would maybe this one over here, because I don't know where they're coming from. I don't know what issues they're experiencing. So it's something just to keep in mind. There's no one shoe fits for everybody when it comes to customer service for teens. We have to be able to adapt. We have to be able to change. And I know everyone here can do that. So with that being said, I thank everybody for participating. I truly hope that it was beneficial. I hope even if you learned one thing today, that's all I need. Feel free to grab my email, my phone number, long distance calls. We're all about it. And I'm here to answer any questions anyone may have.
Hey, Ryan, I want to bring up one question that happened in that last anecdote that you mentioned, because
Yep.
someone asked, where is it? How did you handle that with the staff member, right? Where is that? How did you manage that with that staff member?
Yeah, so it was a conversation we had afterwards. We sat down and I remember asking her, you know, what was it that made you uncomfortable in that situation? And she kind of just said she didn't like the way he was pacing back and forth. She hadn't spoken to him, so she didn't know why he was waiting inside the library. But I think a lot of it boiled down to, we're a very conservative community in Markham. And it's unfortunate to say, but I think sometimes like people of color can still make others uncomfortable, especially when you haven't been exposed to a lot of people of color. And I think for this staff member, a lot of it was just almost like this fear of the unknown, right? She wasn't sure what was going to happen. So we had a conversation afterwards, and, you know, I didn't get into like all this kind of training stuff with her, but we did almost like a little fail camp where we talked about the situation, and I said, like, what do you think went wrong in that situation? And she was able to kind of cool down a little bit. And then she thought about it and said, yeah, I think it was just the way I approached him. Maybe if I wasn't so harsh when I first went up to him, it could have been different. And then I asked her, so what would you do if that situation happened again? And she kind of said, you know, maybe just give a benefit of the doubt when I go over, not be looking for a conflict, and just ask them what they're doing here rather than just approaching right away and saying, you know, you're making people uncomfortable, you're going to have to leave. So she was able to kind of learn from it. And I think that was the most important thing. Just giving them the opportunity to kind of cool down and say, hey, maybe I didn't handle it in the right way. Let's work through how we can be better next time.
And then Sunny followed up, and I'm not sure this is an answer you can give right now, but Sunny, I'm just going to say that this is a really good topic, I think, for a follow-up webinar is she's wondering, and anyone can answer this, is how do you support library staff in interrupting implicit bias coming from adults? And I think that's partly what you were saying, Ryan. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I actually incorporated it into the training I was doing for our library staff last week. We did this detecting bias activity where we had 4 words, light, dark, skinny, and fat. And one at a time, we put them up on the board, and I would say, hey, can everybody just tell me a word you associate with, light, with dark? And we went through. And what staff were able to see, and they were kind of shocked as they did it, they were able to see, oh crap, like, I just associate a lot of bad words with dark, right? So they're saying evil, they're saying bad, they're saying Halloween, scary, death, on and on and on. We use that as a springboard to say, we do this all the time without even realizing it. Now, how do you think that this applies to when we're working with teens? And that's usually what gets them to, get the wheels turning, where they're like, oh, that's true. When I think of a teen, I think of noisy, I think of loud, I think of troublemakers, on and on and on. And once they're able to at least be aware of the bias that they may have, they find it easier to challenge it. And I think that's what we heard from participants even at the end of the session. It was more about kind of bringing it to light, let them understand that it's not, they shouldn't feel guilty about it, because we all have implicit biases that exist within us. But at least understanding it, the next time you find yourself in that situation, taking a moment to be like, okay, well, here's a teen, maybe they are making noise. That doesn't necessarily mean they're all bad. Let me go over it. Let me talk to them. Let me have a chat with them. See, maybe they're just talking about basketball. Maybe they're talking about sports. Is it something I can get engaged with, develop a connection with them around? Hopefully that makes sense, but I'm happy to share like the lesson that we did, that activity. So if you want to send me an email, ask for more information about it, I'm happy to do that.
Great, thank you. And I can unmute people if you want to speak out loud, but are there other questions I missed as we keep going here? Let me just see, and feel free to keep typing away.
Yeah. Like I said, I know I won't be able to answer all the questions because I know we're pressed for time. And email me, and I'm happy to share any of the content, whether it's some of the content from training, some of the programs, like I said. That's what we're here for. If you feel like it was valuable, if you feel like your library, your community can benefit from it, I'm more than happy to share.
And he really means that.
No, it's true. So I'll tell you, I know it's a little different up here as it relates to funding. We have the advantage of doing a lot of the programs for free. Hopefully that doesn't turn people off, because I know not everyone's in that situation. But the advantage with working with some of these community partners is not only are you able to fill in programming gaps, but we're able to run programming in the library. The staffing for the program, maybe it's that organization coming over and they're able to facilitate the program. So for us, I want to say we're lucky when it comes to how we fund our programs. Again, I know not everyone's in that situation. So if you ever want to email and kind of bounce off ideas and find a way to make just a quality program even free for your public, I'm more than happy to do that.
We're definitely going to work on that staff training webinar about implicit bias and related topics. There's Sandra, I'm not sure that the task force that Nicole Cook is chairing is called Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, but there is a YALSA group working this area. So
and I want to say, because I know Sarah had a great question, and so you mentioned, how do you integrate them into the library and get other patrons to accept? I think the first step is advocating for them. Often people will come into the library and, a senior will come up to someone and say, that teen is being loud. And then what will happen is, that staff member will go over and they'll discipline or whatever it is, that teen. But that shouldn't be our first response. Our first response should be to determine, hey, are they actually being loud? Because if they're not, then you say to that senior customer who comes over, well, you know what? This is a shared space. It's a social area. They're working on a school assignment. We encourage people to have discussions when they're in the library. But if you feel like this area is too loud, maybe you and I can work together to find you somewhere else in the library where you can have a little more quiet. So not jumping to conclusions with these teens, advocate for them. When people come up and say these teens are doing something wrong, it's up to you to determine whether or not they are. And if they aren't, have their back the way you would anyone else.
Hey, Ryan, I don't know if you said this, and somebody else should ask the last question because it's time, but how often do you do the staff training like you're talking about?
So this is actually the first time we did something team specific for staff. We've done a lot of different trainings around kind of just like building empathy and all that stuff, but we kept hearing from people, we want more on how to engage with teens, how to interact with teens. So we did it for the first time last week. Like I said, we had 4 separate sessions, 4 days in a row. And now we're looking at just incorporating it into the onboarding training all new staff get, and making sure just everyone across the system gets it.
Great. Thanks. One more last question?
And if you don't get your question in, like I said, don't forget, please feel free to email me. I'm happy to have a discussion offline with anybody.
Great. If anybody's typing, I'm just going to keep going and we can see. So Ryan, thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you guys.
For this. That was obviously, people really got a lot out of it. And I'm really excited that we even have more ideas for webinars from this. So thank you. As I mentioned before, the recording and the slides will go out by tomorrow morning. Might be later today, by tomorrow morning. There'll also be an evaluation. So we'd love to have you fill that out. And if you have ideas for other topics.
And be honest, don't just say good things.
Maybe they want to say just good things.
No, there's always a way to improve. So feel free, please provide as much feedback as you can.
Definitely. And if there's other ideas, that's great. And if you would like a certificate of attendance, you can email me, and I'll put all this in the email I send with the links to the recording and such, but feel free to email me for a certificate of attendance. So thank you all again. Really happy to have you here. Ryan, awesome, as I knew it would be.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everybody.